Normally in life we live in a man-made world, a humanly made world. Sorry for the gender preference there. We live in a world that's constructed by human beings. We live in a cultural world. We have a bit of nature in it. We have bodies. We have to eat. We walk through nature sometimes and observe it, but most of the time we're occupied with cultural objects, and we make our home in culture. This is man-made, humanly constructed world. And that offers us all kinds of symbols to attract our energy and our libido. The human world is full of attractors. Advertisers are looking to push the buttons of our energy systems and draw us to them, so we'll give them our money, and our energy will be attracted to their products.
And some other ideas, some other proportions that you can have an idea. For example, if we would like to use energy in a sustainable and democratic way, that all the people on the world use the same amount of energy, how much could the planet support? What kind of energy could we have at disposition? We could fly once a year to London and then finished. You know, that's the amount of energy that we actually would have at disposition in a democratic way. And that's exceedingly little compared to what we use. As we saw that when we project something, when it's illegitimate and it creates problems outside, when we project outside, we have the whole energy that is fixed outside. So we get drained out of energy when we project and don't make the world to take it in again. And that's exactly what happens with our culture. We are a depressed culture because we always, live like only in the day, and we have no regeneration. So we always make more and more, and it has this quality of addiction, which is also a sign that it's not on the right level. And this allows us to say really that to withdraw a projection is to gain free energy. And neurosis is always something that fixes energy on any kind of stupid thing. And when you can understand the symbolic seed in it and transform it in something that makes sense in your life, that is missing in your life, then you get free energy again. So really, you see why Jung put such an emphasis, and Jungian psychology put such an emphasis on the symbolic understanding, on symbolic life, because this is a mean to liberate energy and also to find our source of energy. And on the contrary, to be cut from the unconscious, to be cut from the symbolic understanding, systematically deprives us of energy. And we have to build a new culture that is aware of these two sides, the material side of technology and the inner side of the symbol or the symbolic life.
And to take a symbolic view of money as energy and take that back, money is so real to us. I thought of this one time in reflecting on the nature of our perception of money and what we project into it. If you had talked to a medieval person about the afterlife, about what heaven was like, what hell was like, what purgatory was like, and how important it was to get to heaven, and how much money you would dedicate to somebody to pray for you after you die. It was so real. The afterlife and the spiritual life was as real to them as our bank accounts are now. Our bank account is now the most real thing. You get your statement at the end of the month and you look at it and your spirits rise or your spirits fall. And they've been falling and falling and falling lately. So it's a depressed culture because of the financial crisis. But you can see how much we've got tied into that. And you ask somebody about the afterlife and they look at you as though, it's totally meaningless. It's totally insignificant It's a hypothesis. To the medieval man, money was a hypothesis. It was something that was useful if you had it, but don't put too much into it. It's too abstract. They had cattle, they had property, but the real thing was the afterlife, was where you go when you die, because that's for eternity. This is a short life, short, difficult, often messy, and painful. The afterlife is where it's all at. So, and that was as real to them. They projected the whole psyche into the afterlife. Read Dante. One other very interesting thing before I stop, I find it tremendously suggestive that Jung writes about in his essay on psychic energy is what he calls surplus energy. He says that human beings, for some reason, we don't know why, have more energy than they need to satisfy their instinctual needs, for example. Some people have talked about, finite beings with an infinite wish. We wish for infinity. We wish for things way beyond our capacities or needs. And this can become very destructive in the world, of course. But it can also be the source of energy for all kinds of creative activities. And Jung attributes to this surplus of energy, he attributes the creation of culture and the creation of religion. Why do human beings create culture? Why aren't we satisfied to live in nature like other animals are, feed ourselves, reproduce ourselves, sleep most of the time if we have enough food, hunt a little bit? And there have been some cultures more or less like that, basically satisfied with what is. But for some reason, the human being is endowed with this surplus. And that surplus also creates dissatisfaction. It creates excess energy. It creates the need to do more than we need to do. But out of that comes Mozart, Beethoven, the great religious ideas of the world, the great monuments, the great cultural institutions are sourced in this surplus of energy. I read a review of that book last week, and I've been thinking about it a good bit since. He bases his argument on quite a lot of statistics about violence in earlier centuries, and actually that in our time, even as violent as it seems, it is a decrease in the total picture, in the big picture of violence. So human beings have evolved strategies for coping. Governments, for instance, big governments, nations, and their organizational structures, police forces and so on, tend to work toward decreasing the incidence of violence, even though it's so much in our media that we think it's everywhere. It's actually going down. And I found this argument very encouraging, because it's very hard to see growth or change. But as Bridget said too, I think if you go back 10 years, people were not nearly as aware about using too much energy as they are now.
Yeah.
So there is a growing consciousness, I think, afoot, thanks to a lot of individuals' efforts, like Gore and others who've made films about this, talked about it. It is getting into the public awareness. And then you have an oil spill and people start thinking, well, maybe I won't buy an SUV next time. Maybe I'll try to reduce my pressure for extracting energy from the earth a bit. And these bits can make a difference. Of course, we've got so far to go that it is rather discouraging in that sense. Right?
Yeah. And it's difficult to know if we are going to be clever enough with our knowledge to be able to make this turn consciously, or if we are going to have such a disaster and will be forced to do it, but with an enormous price of people and of nature.